fellow human beings, PowerGamer here. You know, I've actually been feeling kind of burnt out lately, particularly with Sonic games, given how many I've been playing over the past 5 years, and especially the past 6 months or so. So, clearly, there's only one logical solution to that. Play more Sonic.
Sonic Advance 3, the highly anticipated conclusion to this epic saga. Well, if you actually cared about all of these games at the time they released. The final original Sonic game released for the GBA, like the previous two games, this one isn't really discussed super often. In fact, this might be the one I hear the least amount of discussion around, but that might just be a personal thing. Though it would make sense given how, since it was the last of the three, people likely had more memories of the first two. Like the previous games, it was mainly developed by Dimps, with some assistance from Sonic Team, since they still weren't super familiar with the hardware. Though we were 3 games in by this point, so I figured at least some of them would learn by now, but I digress. Interestingly, Yuji Naka didn't have that much involvement with this game, though he did come up with the idea of characters teaming up, which would end up being its core feature. The game was first announced at a press release in 2003, and it was further shown off at E3 2004. And that's about all the information I could find on this game development, so I guess it went relatively simple and smooth. At least I hope so. Sonic Advance 3 was released on June 7th, 2004 in North America, and the rest of the world got it later that month, except for Australia, which didn't get it until December for some reason. Like previously, the game was a modest hit, selling about as many copies as the second game, but it was nothing too spectacular. And reception was positive enough, though the game's new main mechanic ended up being pretty divisive at the time. Though nowadays I think that's actually its most popular element, which I'm honestly not shocked about, since that's probably the main thing people remember it for.
I have pretty mixed thoughts on the first two Sonic Advance games, so I'm going into this one with an open mind, but I do have my concerns. This is the last of the Advance trilogy, so did this little handheld run go out with a bang or a whimper? Time to finally finish this.
Well, unlike the first two games, we actually have a bit of story here. Dr. Eggman has stolen the Chaos Emeralds and attempts to harness their power to create Eggman Land, but his experiment goes haywire and splits the world apart, separating Sonic and Tails from their friends. Eggman intends to conquer each of these areas, so Sonic and pals have to stop him while also dealing with this robot he built named Gemerl, at least I think that's how that's pronounced. And apparently Gemerl is a reconstructed Emerl, who was a robot that was featured in the spin-off game Sonic Battle, which is just more of a fun fact than anything else. Well, I didn't say this game had a lot of story, but it is more than we had in the previous Advance games. The graphics are basically the same as before, which isn't a complaint since it still looks really good, and the music isn't as good as Advance 2, but it's still decent. We even have some remixed tunes from the Genesis game, so that's nice if you're a fan of those, which I think the vast majority of the population is. And this game even has some voice acting, which is pretty cool for a Game Boy Advance title. In fact, this would end up being the last game to feature most of the original in-game voice actors for each character. Now, the gameplay is similar to the other Advance games, though it leans a bit closer to the first one, since the sense of speed has taken a step back. You only get this dash effect whenever you hit a boost or something, and pulling off tricks isn't as intuitive, so I barely ended up using them. Other than that, it's the same Sonic formula we all know, with the running and the rings and so on. All of the characters from the other Advance games are back. You start out with just Sonic and Tails, but you later unlock Knuckles, Amy, and Cream. And they all have the exact same abilities as they did before, except Sonic doesn't have the Insta-Shield for some reason, which is a little disappointing, and it's possible to stop spinning after a jump, which is just plain stupid because that means you won't kill the enemies. But there are 2 key differences between this and the previous games. The first is that each character doesn't have their own campaign, so you don't have to beat the game 4 times in order to reach the true ending. Thank God for that, because that saved me so much time. And the main reason for this is the second new addition, which if you don't have short-term memory loss, you'll know I briefly hinted to earlier, the team-up mechanic. You're in control of 2 characters at any given time, though really it's more like 1, with the other characters following along to occasionally grab rings or give an extra hit. Basically what Tails did in Sonic 2 and 3, though this time any character can be player 2. But more importantly, they can give you some new abilities. If you hold down the R button, you can charge up a team attack, which will change depending on who your partner is. Sonic gives you a boost of speed, Tails will launch you into the air, or carry you a bit if you're jumping, which isn't very helpful. Knuckles will let you throw him to kill enemies, or let you ride on top of him, which also isn't very helpful. Amy will also launch you into the air, though hers is a lot more vertical than Tails, and Cream will let you charge up Cheese, allowing you to attack enemies with him. And I love how he gets a different appearance depending on which character you're playing as.
The team mechanic is a really cool idea, since it allows for way more variety, and some of these team attacks are just really fun to use. Though, when it comes to the character's default movesets, that's where things start to get a little funky.
Remember how I said each character works the same as before? Well, that's only partially accurate, since some character skills will be altered or outright replaced depending on your partner. Now, sometimes this can be helpful, like when Knuckles is paired up with Tails, he jumps a little before gliding, and his punch becomes this fiery uppercut. When Sonic is paired up with Knuckles, he can attack by doing this fire kick, and when he's with Cream, he can do this little air dash. When Amy is paired up with Sonic, she can actually do the freaking spin dash. When she's paired up with Knuckles, she can also dash, though it doesn't spin, plus her hammer is stronger, and she can do that hammer launch from the Sonic Adventure. And when paired up with Cream, she can glide with these balloons. But others just end up being more of a hindrance. Like when Knuckles is paired up with Sonic, he can't glide or climb, he just does this headbutt attack. When Tails is paired up with Knuckles, his tail swipe is much stronger, but he just glides with boxing gloves instead of flying, which sucks. When Tails is paired up with Cream, his flight is severely nerfed, which I do not understand. When anyone is paired up with Amy, their attacks are replaced with a hammer, which can be helpful, like how Tails can use it when flying, but it also means they can't just jump on enemies. And when Cream is paired up with Tails, she can't fly, she just glides with this umbrella, which is kind of a problem since Tails is the only one that allows her to still home in on enemies with cheese. ease. With Sonic, he just charges forward, with Knuckles, he orbits you like a shield, and with Amy, Cream borrows the hammer. So I do really like the team-up mechanic, but there were some combinations that are just not helpful, at least to me anyway. But the one thing I will certainly give this game flack for is the controls. I don't know what happened here, but they cranked up the acceleration way too high in this game. It takes almost no time at all to increase your movement speed, especially when jumping, which for the most part isn't a huge deal, but when the platforming gets way more intense towards the later parts of the game, it can be extremely frustrating. Speaking of which, the level design in this game is pretty mixed. Most of the levels are alright, and some even have paths that are only reachable by certain characters, which I actually like since it encourages you to experiment with them more. But the biggest issue is that this game goes way too overboard with the spikes. I thought the first advanced game could have a lot, but this is on a whole other level. There are so many freaking spikes in this game that it is absurd. I hope you're not afraid of needles, because this game will be your worst nightmare. Plus, this game isn't afraid to be cheap with its enemy placement or crushing you with blocks, though thankfully that doesn't happen too often. Now luckily this game is generous with pits, so the stuff usually isn't enough to kill you, but it can be pretty annoying at times and cause some levels to overstay their welcome. Plus each zone is now 3 acts instead of 2, much like the original Sonic game.
I wouldn't say the level design in this game is awful, but it does have some pretty prominent issues, though I don't think it's as frustrating as the more annoying parts of the first Sonic Advance game, or even the boss fights of the second one.
Let's get more specific with the levels. The first one is Route 99, which is a city level instead of another Green Hill ripoff. Still something that's been done before, but hey, I'll take it. Like I said 30 seconds ago, it can go overboard on the spikes, and crushing blocks were not needed in the very first level, but other than that, it works fine enough. Sunset Hill is probably what you'd expect the first zone to be, but the sunset does make it look pretty. It's got some springs that fling you back, poles to spin on, that wasn't meant to be a double entendre, and some water. Ocean Base is a giant underwater factory, which is a decent idea, but the levels are a bit too vertical for my liking, which can make them annoying to traverse. The different machine parts like cannons and moving platforms can help with that, but I really hate these platforms you have to keep jumping on or else they go down. Toy Kingdom is basically music played from the last game if you replace the instruments with toys, but that's not necessarily a bad thing since bouncing and launching off of them can be fun, though these wheels you can jump off of make no sense. Twinkle Snow is another ice level with pointless water sections like the first Advance game, along with a bunch of rails and some minecarts to ride in, so it's not all bad. Cybertrack is a futuristic level because we always need at least one of those, with cannons, spinny bars, and anti-gravity. Can Sonic games just give up on the anti-gravity stuff already? It's not fun, it's annoying. Yeah, I wasn't a huge fan of this level. And finally, Chaos Angel, which is a temple-style level with some neat ideas like falling boulders, but the first act goes on way too long, the second is full of pits, and the last one is a glorified auto-scroller. So yeah, the levels aren't great, but I wouldn't say they're terrible either. Each level even has medals you can get at the end, though the one you jump into to finish the level off doesn't mean anything, it all comes down to how quickly you beat the stage. Getting all the gold medals just unlocks a sound test, so you don't need to grab these in order to beat the game. Another new addition is that you can actually find Omochao, who will give you hints if you push up next to him. But the biggest change to the level structure is we actually have a hub world this time, and you enter the levels by jumping into these giant rings. Plus there's these bonus games lying around, which can give you extra lives. You either have to kill enemies under a time limit or hit these buttons to score points under a time limit. They're simple and can be a little screwy, but they're fine enough for what they are. Admittedly, navigating the hub worlds can be a little annoying with how many branching paths there are, but I am ultimately happy with these things for one simple reason. The boss fights are in their own separate sections, so if you keep struggling with one, you don't have to replay the entire level or, God forbid, the entire zone in Advance 2 case every time you get a game over, which saved me a bunch of time. So thank you, Sonic Advance 3.
Speaking of which, the boss fights in this game are nowhere near as annoying as they were in Sonic Advance 2, so that is a huge relief. But that doesn't mean all of them are winners.
They're all Eggman inside some powerful machine that Gemerald is tapped into, plus every other zone has a fight with Gemerald in the last act where he just jumps around, and with every fight he gets more attacks like some missiles. Aside from the first and last fights, if you beat him with Sonic, you then unlock another character. First Knuckles, whom Sonic basically taunts into helping them, then Amy tries to ask him out, and when he says no, she threatens him with physical violence, and Cream just says she got lost on a walk and decides to join. Route 99 is your first Gemerald fight, followed by Eggman and this giant hammer that swings back and forth. He got tired of using the hammer, and instead became the hammer. Not much to say about this, just make sure you're on the correct side, and the hit detection can be kinda wonky. Sunset Hill, he's in a giant ball and just rolls around the arena, so you have to wait until his weak spot is vulnerable, which is honestly kind of fun. Ocean Base, he's in this giant leg robot that you have to stand under and then jump into. I never thought a Sonic game would require upskirt action, but here we are. Maybe DeviantArt was rubbing off on them. Toy Kingdom, he's in a Jack-in-the-Box, and you have to wait for him to pop out of the side while avoiding this Gemerald spike ball and these things from the sky. But you don't just have to hit him enough times, you have to keep pushing him to the side until he falls in this hole. Oh yeah, there's holes on both sides, so you can die at any time. Lovely. Twinkle Snow was the worst fight in the game. You have to jump up these falling platforms as he climbs after you and hurls the spike ball. The only way you can hurt him is if the platforms hit him, which is completely luck-based, and if you get hit once, you die instantly. I hated this fight. Cybertrack, he shoots these blue orbs you have to jump into so that they turn orange and bounce back into him. It's a fun idea, but it just ends up being really annoying because of how hard it is to aim them, and your partner can bounce them back into you. Also, there's insta-death platforms on the side, because of course. Chaos Angel, he spins around this track, and you have to jump on the other side of them to launch him into these spikes, but when he spins around, it's really hard to avoid him without also touching the spikes. Yeah, I mainly used cheese for this. Once Once you beat him, you're transported to Alter Emerald. Here we have our final General fight where he moves really fast, and then the true final showdown with Eggman. He's in a giant robot that slams its hands down to remove the platforms, and then he'll use them to grab you or bounce these mines around. You just need to hit him in the head while making sure you don't bump into the hands, so it mainly boils down to using the best possible team combination, which for me ended up being Sonic and Cream thanks to the air dash. Once you figure that out, the fight isn't too difficult, and thankfully doesn't waste my time as much as the last game did. Once you beat him, Eggman flies away, but Sonic knocks him down with Gemerald chasing after him, and the Master Emerald restores the world to normal. Everyone then celebrates as Omochao takes a picture.
But like in the previous advanced games, in order to unlock the true final boss, you have to collect all 7 Chaos Emeralds, which is easily the most annoying part of the previous 2 games. I guess I can give them points for consistency.
This whole process is like a slightly less annoying combination of the 2 previous games. Keyword being slightly. You have to collect 10 Chao hidden in each zone, and when I say zone, I mean the entire zone, all 3 acts, and even one in most of the hub worlds. Once you collect all 10 of them, you can then find a special key that shows up randomly in each stage, though it's almost always in a spot that's really easy to find. After collecting the key, you can then jump on the special spring in the hub world, and this will take you to the bonus stage. Much like the special rings in Advance 2, finding all of the Chao in each zone is extremely annoying and takes forever, especially if you don't have a guide. Thank you, Internet. But unlike the special rings in Advance 2, you only have to collect each Chao once. Once you find it, it's yours for good, and the game even autosaves every time you find one. So that alone makes finding these things significantly less awful than these bastards. But the keys, on the other hand, you can only grab 1 per level, and unlike the Chao, you have to beat the level without dying in order to collect them. And you can only use them 1 time, so you still need to fully replay a level every time you fail the special stage. As for the special stages themselves, they're another pseudo 3D thing like in the first Advance game where you fly around and collect rings, only instead of being on a surfboard, you're standing on the wings of the tornado. The depth perception is still not great, but your hitbox is way more generous, and you can jump, which makes them much less of a pain than in Advance 1, at first. Because once we get to the last few, the game requires you to be painfully precise when grabbing the right amount of rings. You have to avoid these mines, which are normally not that bad, but the ones that shoot you can be nearly impossible to see. And the controls are slightly delayed unless you fly through these blue rings that make your movement more precise and doubles the value of any rings you grab, but if you hit a mine, you lose your boost instantly. I cleared out the first 3 special stages on my first try, and while the 4th one took a couple attempts, the 5th and 6th ones took me forever, and the last one drove me nearly insane because you have to play basically perfectly. Genuinely, what the hell was going on with the advanced games and the Chaos Emeralds? Because every single one of these drove me to nearly quit the game. If you actually do manage to get them all and refight the final boss, instead of Sonic bopping Eggman, Gemerald will knock away the Chaos Emeralds and absorb some of their power to turn into an orb, and then betray Eggman before flying off into space, because where else would he go? Sonic then absorbs the rest of the Emerald's powers to transform into Super Sonic and chases after him, with Eggman following suit. The final boss, titled Non-Aggression, has Eggman become your partner, which is honestly pretty cool. You need to charge up your team attack to throw Eggman into Gemerald to expose his eye, allowing you to charge into him. All the while, he bombards you with a bunch of attacks like lasers, missiles, and his arms to slow you down, with the most annoying one being this roll attack. Like previous supersonic fights, you have to keep grabbing rings that are slowly drained, and he takes an absurd amount of hits to kill. It's a decent enough final boss, but again, not really worth the headache it takes to get to it. In the end, Gemerald explodes, and Sonic wakes up back on Earth. He runs off with everybody except for Knuckles, who stays behind to guard the Master Emerald. Yeah, almost forgot that was his job or something, but then we see Gemerald's remains wash up on the beach. Tails fixes him up and reprograms him before sending him to live with Cream and Vanilla. And after the credits, we see a genuinely cute moment between him and Cream.
Game Conquer. Sonic Advance 3, like the previous Advance games, is a mixed bag. The team-up mechanic is cool, though it does have some issues. The levels range from decent enough to pretty frustrating, and the boss fights are mostly solid with a couple of duds. But the controls are really obnoxious, and once again, getting the Chaos Emeralds is a giant test of pain. Now, of the 3 Advance games, I'd say this one's probably my favorite, just because the frustrating parts aren't quite as bad as the previous 2 games. But I still don't see myself going back to this one much. I know a lot of people have fond nostalgia for these games, and that's cool and all, but for me, they pale in comparison to the Genesis titles, since while they do have their high points, they sadly have some glaring issues that really bring them down. So I'd say I only recommend these to either die-hard Sonic fans or people who grew up with them and want to revisit them. Really is a shame it didn't do anything to help my Sonic burnout, though. So, I guess there's only one other option. Play Sonic Rush.
Or that makes more sense.